and spun around, and I went down and was eyeball to eyeball with the snake. Picture of rear, but I think here I am. I didn't think I was going to make it.
And we didn't either. When you said, I heard that there was a snake involved, I thought it was a director you were working with. You got your flag. And you won, I thought.
Plenty of those guys, yeah.
So just, I read this a little short because having watched this film with my friends here, and I will just witness, I had never seen it on a big screen. Any of you have? You have? I had never, ever. I was too young. Oh, some people were too. But it was such a thrill to see it on the big screen. Was that Gordy Willis was the, oh, beautiful black and white cinematography. But so can you tell me the last time that you saw the film? Even a big screen or small screen, I'm just curious.
Yes, I saw it at, it's kind of interesting, I saw it at the main International Film Festival in Waterbury, Maine.
Oh, that's cool.
Where they gave me the Midlife Achievement Award at 75.
Nice.
Which I thought was optimistic.
Well, that's great. So you got a few more years to go.
So it's a couple of years ago, yeah. It was the last time I saw it.
So that's a few years ago. But I wanted to ask you a few questions, and I'm happy to open it up to anyone that's what to see. But I was curious as to, when you think of the making of Manhattan, well, first of all, did you first meet Woody on the front?
Yeah.
So you were both actors in that film, and that was Marty Ritt, was the director?
Yes.
So you met there, and then how did you connect for Manhattan?
We became very good friends on the front, and I was living in California, and I went back. I thought I'd spend 10 weeks there, and I met Woody, and we became very, very good friends, and I just moved. I stayed there for 25 until I got married late in the game, until I was about, I'm married at 49, so.
But you're living to 150, so it's too early in life.
I have 2 young children I don't know what to do with. But, so it was an interesting introduction because he and I didn't know that much about him. He hadn't done Annie Hall. I knew he was very well, highly regarded, and he was a very funny guy, but an eccentric guy. And so Marty was just terrific. Oh, God. I mean, I could get into stuff. It would take an hour and a half, but I'll tell you one quick one on how we met.
Great.
So we're in this hall, this little, well, kind of rehearsal room, and the rehearsals aren't going very well. And Woody, and then we took a break, and everybody went out for a smoke, and I'm sitting there. The two of us are sitting there looking at each other, and I said, I can do this, and I said, well, how do you think this is going? And I touched his knee like that, and he was a little pinky up in there. He took my hand and put it back in my lap. I didn't know I was not supposed to touch it. So we got off to a slow start, but then it became nice, and we're still friends. I mean, I see him all the time when I'm in here.
And so did he? I imagine he writes his scripts one year and then cranks them out. So did he approach you with a script, or did he talk to you beforehand? Or?
We were just going along, and he said, "Well, I'm ready to do this one," and I knew I was going to be in it. It's the one script I've saved because it says, and Yale walks in the room, and then in parentheses says Mike Murphy, and I thought, well, yeah, I'll keep that.
That's a keeper.
Yeah.
That's great.
So he had me in mind all along, and I knew it, and it was.
Well, it's so thrilling, and of course I knew this, and we all knew it, but to see Diane Keaton again, and to see Meryl Streep, I almost forgotten she was in it, and then she walks out.
First and last time you'll ever see my name above Meryl Streep.
Still, you got all this time, 150 years, you're going to blow past her, don't worry about it. But, no, so...
I don't think so.
She keeps going. Well, so
this is great.
When you think of that experience of making Manhattan with Woody in Manhattan, and with this wonderful cast of characters, and you'd never worked with Diane before, had you?
No, I hadn't. No.
So it must have been an interesting moment for you all to kind of...
It was.
You were all in this wonderful place in your careers where they were happening, but they were really happening after this film. I think it kind of did put all of you kind of on the map a little bit. I mean, you all had played,
Well, it was an interesting time because we'd sort of gotten into this auteur thing. And when I first got to Hollywood, I started in New York. I wound up out on the West Coast, and I caught the tail end of the I caught the tail end of the Mad Men era in New York, and then
The real Mad Men.
the real Mad
For
Men,
real,
where
yeah.
Cloud at noon, and wandering down Madison Avenue making a deal, and everybody dressed up and carrying on. I loved it. I mean, I was overwhelmed by New York. I thought, because I grew up in California. But then I wound up going back to California until this picture. So I was out there for maybe 15 years, and this picture came up, and I met Marty. Marty had this really curmudgeonly kind of, he was the best guy, and I was sort of naive about it all, and he wore these jumpsuits that zipped up the front, short sleeve jumpsuits, seersucker. That was his uniform. That's all they ever wore.
And a seersucker jumpsuit?
Yeah, and he was Jewish, which I didn't know. And I walked in, I sat down, the first thing out of his mouth, he said, "I have too many Jews in this picture." I said, "Oh, really?" I knew what to say. And so I played Walter Bernstein, who actually wrote the movie. And who had
This is the front we're talking about.
Yes, yeah. And who had been blacklisted. And that's how I met Woody. Then I went to New York and met Woody and just stayed. And,
Yeah.
So the rest is...
That's exciting. And Walter Bernstein, who actually was a mentor of mine when I was in graduate school.
Oh, really?
It's so exciting to...
I've seen him recently. He's like 95 or something.
Just great, he's a terrific guy.
But all these guys had been blacklisted, It was a really sad era. And they were such terrific people. If you ever get a chance to take a look at that picture, it's pretty good. I mean, it really was...
Oh, no, the front
big bomber around when we put it out, but it's not bad.
Interesting to see...
I'm sorry, which movie is it?
It's called The Front.
Oh my God,
Yeah.
I've seen that.
Yeah.
It's fabulous.
Yeah, Zero Mostel and Woody and...
Yeah.
And I don't know, Michael, is that one of the last films Woody acted in and didn't direct?
Yeah, he did one more with Bette Midler years
Right.
later. But he said he never got any offers. He said, no, I had to write him, nobody would ever cast me in anything. And that was always his
That's interesting.
thing,
So one thing I just wanted to touch on was, because a lot has been made of this film, and Yale is morally ambiguous, I think they call it. But then also An Unmarried Woman, which I know you've lived this thing forever, and it probably kept you from dating for a few years. And
Those two pictures, I couldn't get a date for 4 years.
But I love that in some magazine they called you the heel of the moment because of these two films. If you've seen An Unmarried Woman with Jill Clayburgh and Michael, obviously, and Alan Bates.
It's a terrible husband, they left her.
Oh my goodness. But what you also said was that you were the first whining yuppie in that film. And yuppies hadn't been invented, and this man did it. And you did it with such just flair. And
A lot of whining.
well, for those of us who would eventually aspire to be that kind of whining, post-yuppie, heel of the moment, I thank you, because you've been my role model from that film.
But it was fun to make. I mean, and I knew what was going on. I knew it probably never work again. But to play those roles is really fun. You can dig that stuff out of yourself. It's really an interesting thing to do. And then Manhattan, I was cheating on my wife again in that one.
I know.
And
sleazy guys are people too, so thank you for...
Woody's always professed to not like this movie. He's like Altman. They were, if it's a success, saying,
Do you think he's protesting a little too much? Okay.
I finally said, come on. I said, this is a good picture. We're all okay in it, and the writing is fabulous. The music, the cinematography, the whole thing. I said, what are you complaining about? I said, glad you liked it, Murphy. You would give me an inch.
So can you think of, because I know you're here tomorrow to talk about a lot of other Altman and your other relationships, but I was curious on this film in particular, since we just all witnessed it together, can you think of either a word or a phrase that really encapsulates what it was like to be in that movie at that moment? Just something that kind of...
Yeah, it was great. New York was, it was dangerous. It was a dangerous city in those days, and Woody made this as a kind of conscious Valentine to New York. I was just, and he was the kind of guy that used to like to take you around and show you things. And, I think he thought of me because I groped his knee and was obviously from California. But I was sort of a male Diane Keaton or something. We became very friendly, and he'd always take me places, and I didn't really know he was educating me, but he was.
Right.
And in New York, I'd always been in love with New York, and it was the whole thing was so fabulous. And he was Mr. New York in those days. I mean, after Annie Hall had come out, he was just, you know, you would, and you know, when you're accompanying a heavy-duty celebrity like that, especially a guy like Woody, he doesn't see what's going on, but you do. You know, you're walking along, and he's got me by the cuff, you know, and what's happening over there, Murphy? He's got his head all cut down. And what was happening was the most gorgeous women in New York were all sort of weak in the knees as they went by.
And you sure it wasn't you, Michael? Why are you giving it to Woody?
Well, that's what I no.
Just take the credit for
the notes would come over to Elaine's, and I would say, he'd say, well, what is it? I said, oh, just give it to me. I'll call her. They'd call me tonight, you know, and stuff like that. I mean, he was just a heartthrob. It was real interesting.
It's well, yeah, it's interesting.
He hit a sort of intellectual level with women that I guess had not happened with, I don't know, Kirk Douglas or whoever those guys were that before him.
Back in the day.
Yeah.
Well, it was so interesting to see Wallace Shawn show up.
Oh, Wally.
If you know Wallace Shawn, he shows up at the ex-husband, you know, and yeah.
Jeremiah.
Jeremiah, that was it.
Opened me up sexually.
And then Woody said, wait a minute, wait a minute. That's what this guy was? It was
Oh, he was that homunculus? That little homunculus?
I just laughed. I mean, I'm sorry if I, you know.
And Wally's like the smartest guy in the world.
No, no.
Oh, God. Hilarious.
So-
So what great casting. And then Woody just backs right off the screen.
Yeah, yeah.
That was a really good moment. And she says, Jeremiah, you look so great, you lost weight. He says, yeah, I've got a bicycle.
Well, you know, there's so many great moments.
And he flunked her. He was sleeping with her, but he flunked her. He'll be thinking about it.
What's that?
Yeah,
okay, that's right.
Oh, yeah, and then they made a joke about that.
That was great. Well, so can you tell me a little bit what it's like? What it's like to be directed by Woody Allen, and what is his style? Because I know that with Altman, you had said on Nashville, you said, well, what are we doing here? And he said, you're somebody's nephew.
Yeah,
that was it.
That was on Bob. We could really cut to the chase. And all the good directors, it seems to me, the ones I've had the most luck with, really give you a lot of room and leave you alone. And they know they've hired somebody that they think can do it. That they give you the freedom to do it. You know. I mean, but they were a little bit different in that Bob, it didn't matter what was on the page. I mean, he was just looking for real moments. And,
Robert Altman.
Yeah, so you would paraphrase a lot of stuff, and it usually worked. Woody, we'd do the same thing, and I remember after Manhattan, he said, I wish we hadn't done that thing about her being neurotic or something, you know. I talk about this neurotic woman I met or something. And I said, why? What happened to her or something? You know, I don't know. And he didn't write it that way. Then we had a scene at the end of the movie that we couldn't get. It was that thing where he confronts me there with that skeleton.
That was a
and it was like, you know, we couldn't get it. We tried it in my apartment. The movie was cut and it was ready to go. It was like 10 days before it was released.
Really?
We would go over to Hunter College every weekend and shoot something. And I remember we were in a room with in a lab, and he looked across through those glass windows and the doors, and he said, oh, let's move this over there. And we did.
You mean the skeleton?
Yeah, he saw
it's just beautiful.
Saw that room, and he made all that up on the spot. You know, he was just terrific with that stuff.
Oh, so a lot of it was ad-libbed in that moment at least.
That moment, we sat at a desk and tried to write something, and, you know, but it was mostly. But for the most part, you know, you're given great freedom with these guys, and
with the best directors.
Yeah, and it moved. You know, you don't want to be micromanaged to the point of no return. And it's interesting because Bob would, you know, he would turn his hand to writing, and Woody writes, of course, everything himself, and except once in a while with Marshall Brickman.
Yeah.
And he's not tied to it. You know, if you come up with something better, he's happy with it.
Right. So it wasn't ever, you can't change those words, like David Mamet would be very...
No, you can change those words with those guys, yeah. Oh yeah, you never had that attitude.
Yeah. And I'm not maligning Mamet, but he has a very specific way of directing.
Well, he's a bit of a bully.
In a nice way.
Just stand by the window, you know.
So, are there any questions? I have a bunch more, but this gentleman right here, and I'm going to repeat them just so we all hear.
Can you talk a little bit about the scene where the four of you are in the movie theater? how long did it take to shoot? How was the timing worked out, if at all? Because there were no words, obviously, and it all has to do with takes. So I'm just curious about that.
It's interesting that you bring that
Let me
up.
just repeat it for the folks in the back. Just the scene in the movie theater where they're all sitting there, it's brilliant. I'm so glad you brought that up because it's a piece of just pure acting. And the camera, I don't think, really moves.
No, and we reshot that stuff.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it was, what he did the first time was they moved the camera and they panned across. I mean, he moved the camera to Woody and Woody's looking around, and then he moved on to me or however we were seeing.
Yeah.
Diane.
Well, you and Diane were together, and then Woody
And Ann Hoffman
that was on the far end. Yeah, it was great.
She was married to Dustin Hoffman and Homer. Yeah, they were in the midst of a big time divorce when we made that movie. Yeah.
Wow.
He was around at some point. He would come.
So it was shot completely differently at first.
Yeah. So then Woody said, "We look like idiots," and then he said, "We'll reshoot it," and he did it like you mentioned. And we just sat there, and the camera was like one hand, I think.
Yeah.
And we just sat there and we looked at each other. And, we just played it all in one take. It took about 20 minutes. It was quite easy to shoot it. And it worked better than I thought it was going to work.
It's amazing because, there are no cues, but people are just behaving.
Yeah.
It was just exquisite, and you just don't know how to do that. That's just
That's
great.
the beauty of cinema, you don't need to be yapping all the time. I mean, if you can project it. Alan Ladd, of all people, said this great thing one day. You're all old enough to remember Alan Ladd.
Shame.
He came out, he was having lunch at the commissary, and he said, I did a great take today. And the actor that was with him said, "What'd you do?" And he said, I went like this. And he's right. It worked.
It's that look.
Yeah.
That's great. Yes.
The thing I particularly liked about that scene was that Anne was an anchor of composure, and she didn't change in the whole scene.
Yeah.
She's looking ahead, and she's just very
Right,
calm.
that's
And
right.
the tension is among the three of you, but she's just ignoring the obvious tension.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that made it really.
It's interesting. I'm getting some really interesting stuff here today.
Yeah.
The thing about Anne was Woody knew her because everybody went to the Knicks games and they sat close to one. I don't think Anne she was a dancer. She'd never been in a movie.
Really? Wow.
And I said, boy, great casting. She's great, and she was sort of right for this guy. And he said, I needed somebody who could take care of herself. That could. Yeah. And she did. And you see that scene in the end where she's sitting with him eating ice cream or something.
Yeah.
And she says, I was pissed off about you when you did that to me or something. But she wasn't too upset. She seemed to roll with it. She was in control of it all. And I remember him saying, I wish I'd left the camera on her. I cut too fast on that.
It's an extraordinary moment because when she says that and then you cut to Woody is so natural in that moment where he really is processing what she's saying. And I guess I was a bit of a jerk, and it's unbelievable.
I mean, I think it's his best acting performance. He's done funnier stuff,
Yeah.
but boy, when he at the end of that movie, when he's looking at her and the Hemingway kid, he's going, however he did it, it was great. Just those little bits.
Well, it's interesting. I know in some interview, I think at the Cannes Film Festival, he was talking about directing, and he hates to talk about this stuff. But they did get him to say, and he basically says, "Look, I forget what movie it was. It was Owen Wilson, isn't it? And Rachel McAdams. Midnight in Paris, yeah. Which I first watched, and I thought, and then I became kind of addicted to it. I think I watched it 5 times on the weekend. There's something about it that seeing Owen Wilson playing Woody, basically, it's a Woody character. But in any case, he said, "Look, I hire these people and I just they do their thing. And he just, it's that kind of workman kind of, or work person kind of approach to things. You hire a good carpenter, you hire a good plumber, and we're going to put this together. So, not to suggest that you're a plumber.
Well, I could have. I'll tell you about that. The movie Vicky Cristina Barcelona?
Yes.
Well, I said, I got a big kick out of that one. That when his girlfriend or his wife comes in and just, he's such a Casanova, and she just owns him, and they get in that big fight in Spanish. And I said, Jesus, that was good. It was so real and everything. And I said, so they were just winging that, right? And he said, no, I wrote every word of that. They translated it and did it.
Really? Wow.
And you wouldn't wouldn't know that for a second, would you? I mean, you were overlapping each other and carrying on, yeah.
That's great.
Yeah.
Other question? This gentleman here, and then I'll get you.
Yeah, I haven't seen the film for quite a while, but I was struck by the echoes of French New Wave in terms of the cinematography of this, and
Yeah.
that's really the only one of Woody's films that I can remember that sort of seemed that self-consciously doing that. Is that something that?
Yeah, he kind of had that in mind.
You know, it seemed like Truffaut almost.
Yeah. I mean, we didn't talk about it, but I knew, and he always said about it, he said, I just want to make a picture in black and white.
Yeah.
I said, yeah, with that music, it's in the scope of Gordy Willis.
It's such a great opening to a film. It sets up this universe where we just, I don't know about you, but I just kind of sank back into it.
Yeah, I mean,
That's
he
great.
was,
Yeah.
there's a million stories.
This gentleman here.
Oh,
And then
sure.
we'll go-
First of all, thank you for coming and joining us today.
Oh, thank you.
Did the actors all see the full script before you started filming? I understand Woody Allen tends to hold back time.
You know, in this one, yeah, everybody did. I said that to him. I said, I got to read this before so I know what I'm doing. And he said, I don't know, of course. He did. Most of that came, I'd heard that about him too. Most of that came later.
Where we withhold pages?
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. I didn't know that.
Well, he writes these jokes, and if they don't work,
Oh.
he doesn't want them around because he uses them somewhere
You
else.
should see this piece of crap that you
Got all
created.
this whole
Right.
and then I'll die, Murphy. I don't know. He was giving all his movies to Moma, and then he said, well, and then he stopped doing it. He said, well, I'm going to be dead. Here I'm getting the perfect print.
Let them
for
pay
Moma.
for him or something, you know? I mean, yeah. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
This is not so much a question as a memory, but I played waitress in A Married Woman when we were in that cafe when you told her.
Is that right?
Oh, wow.
Oh,
That's awesome.
that was a good scene, I liked that.
You're
Yeah.
out the blood.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
She went, yeah.
But,
That's where my life began to sort of tail off.
No, but that's,
I'm writing an article, and I have to run off to do something else, but I'd love to catch up with you.
Sure, of course. I'll be
that's
around.
good.
Yeah.
And thank you for being such a trooper.
Well,
I do want to underline that. Thank you. You know, if I'm just having a bad hair day as I am today, I might not show up. But this man breaks his shoulder, chasing snakes and dogs and fighting off all kinds of things. And I just am
couldn't have
so,
done it yesterday. I got a little sleep in it.
it's just such a testament. But other questions? Yes, sir. Yes.
Prior to the movie, had you ever played squash before?
Oh God, we're the worst. Two doofuses playing squash, but I had a hold of that thing right near the head and trying to spew dialogue at the same time,
I'm sorry, I had to ask.
No,
You're a squash player, I guess.
I've never seen one of those rackets. Neither did he.
That's why they.
tennis though. We can play pretty good tennis.
What do you think?
Yeah. Oh, it's embarrassing. But I thought, after I got older and relaxed about it, I thought, it sort of worked, 'cause we were just futzing around out there. We didn't know what the hell we were doing.
That's awesome. Somebody in the back
It
was
doesn't embarrass me anymore.
Oh, yes, sir. Wait back there.
Yeah, this was I'm glad that you mentioned that about the scene with the skeletons. That's always been very compelling to me because I think there's this wonderful, I've always tried to figure out, I didn't know that about the big heel or the comment there, but you do have this feeling, you really sympathize, you really like Yale, you're actually kind of rooting for him, but what you're rooting for him to be is a little more honest with himself, whereas the Isaac character prevaricates, and he's honest with other people, but he doesn't see what's right in front of him. And I think the difference between the two characters is fundamentally the difference in their attitude towards their own mortality. And I think that the Yale character is not addressing it. He's not dealing with it. When Anne wants him to have kids, he says, no, I got to write a book, and I got to buy a car.
That's what he's really saying.
Yeah, and he's obviously avoiding the conversation. But I think that Woody Allen character, you see it right away. I'm getting a younger girl. How old am I going to be when you were, whatever age? And that's such a neat tension between it because one of the great lines I think the whole movie comes out of Yale's mouth, your mouth, and that is, we're just people here.
Right.
We don't know how to do this. It's beautiful.
I'm glad you brought that.
I am too, because I've been busted for that scene many times.
Really?
Yeah, I
What
mean,
do you mean?
Well, it sort of brings people down. A lot of people.
Oh, I disagree. I think that's one of the great performances. because I think you bring up a really great point towards the end of that scene when Woody is grilling him or drilling him, and Yale then you can see you copping to it in a way, in a weird way, like you don't want to admit it, but you realize, yeah. And I think that's a phenomenal scene. And it's something else about your acting that I've noticed, because I did a little bit of research and I've looked at some of your films, and I'm a big fan anyway. But I don't know if I ever see you acting. And I'm not suggesting that this is you, but you do this thing that a lot of times some of the greats we know, when they act, we're like, wow, that's great acting. And you don't do that. You are actually, every time I see you play a part, even in a broad comedy or in a drama, you are that. Now, I didn't see you in Combat, one of your first roles with Bob Altman.
Very good. I was tank driver number 1.
In the hospital, yeah. And then I think you followed it up with this scintillating performance, and I think you were soldier in hospital, uncredited.
That's right.
That's an IMDb. But anyway, I'm glad you brought that up. It was great. I think I'm supposed to sort of wrap this up, but I could take a couple more questions, and Lloyd won't beat me up. This gentleman
Can
here.
I point out one more thing?
Yeah.
Now that I'm on a roll here.
Yeah, go for it.
Get my mind off my dog. That scene that you pointed out, if you take a look at this picture now that you're going to know all the inside dope, if you look at us, we look totally different in that picture, in that scene than we do in the rest of the movie. Yeah. Because by then we were both sort of curly-haired kids. When kids, we were in our 30s, late 30s, I guess, early 40s. We both had curly hair, and in the summer in New York, I could hear my hair curdling, and then it was the middle of winter. Both of us have kind of a whole different look. Yeah, and that was because we couldn't get that scene shot.
Oh, you had to reshoot it.
Yeah.
Which I guess Woody does. He builds into his budget an extra 30% or something
You
for
almost
reshoots,
always
which is brilliant.
You almost always do that. And let me tell you one other quick thing before we get up.
Take your time, no.
It's all coming up to me now. So one night we're standing on a corner, and he said, Murphy, he said, you smell that burning rubber? I said, oh no, he said, do you smell any? I said, well, it's somewhere in New York, I don't know what it is. Right, I just can't identify it. And he said, you don't smell burning rubber? And I said, no. And he said, well, who were the names? The guys, the Gershwins, Ira Gershwin. He says, Ira Gershwin had a brain tumor, and the first thing that happened to him, his first symptom was burning rubber. Madison Avenue.
And this isn't a bit, he's
just serious. And then later I found out, told me he went up to Mount Sinai Hospital or something, had a very expensive x-ray of his brain, because and then I got laughing about it. And then years later we talked about it again, and he said, well, I had all that stuff, I was cutting the movie, and I was playing that Gershwin stuff over and over and over and over, and then I thought of him, and I thought of that brain tumor, and I knew I had one, He's very, he's a hypochondriac of the first water.
Have you, we'll get to you, I promise, but I'm just, Barbara Koppel, the documentary filmmaker, she's here this weekend. Yeah, she's up here with a new film called Gigi Gorgeous, which is a really interesting film.
She's wonderful.
She's amazing. Anyway, she did the film on Woody, Session Man, or no.
Yeah, when they went
overseas. But, you really do see him considering, I smell burning rubber, I must have a tumor.
Oh, yeah. He was really...
So, he's just a fascinating guy. This gentleman here, yes, in the middle.
Yeah, hey, Michael. I just was curious. You said that how Woody kind of leaves you alone, and some of the best directors do, but you did mention kind of having rehearsals with Woody beforehand. Did he talk to you at least about, look, this is kind of what I'm thinking for your character?
No, we never did.
Nothing.
Very, very, no. He just said, we look like idiots, let's try something else. But it was really, we were all so friendly, and he'd crack a joke or something. But no, there was never any of that, my vision stuff ever with him, or with Altman, either one of those guys.
Gotcha.
The difficulty is, we're now being, many writers are directing. And it's good if you get the right guy, but boy, I've come across it where you leave an article out of a sentence and you gotta, I gotta redo that. You forgot to say, and you don't want to get hung up in that stuff because it isn't sacrosanct. It works great in the theater. Because, you've got these lines that have been rehearsed and thought out, and the guys, usually in a movie they're kind of throwing it at you, and you want to get going with whatever accident happens on the screen, or something good happens, and they see that you're having a bad hair day, and I'll try to, take a look at it or something, that kind of stuff works beautifully when you can get it. A lot of guys don't lie to get it, but some of them do it. What the hell are you gonna be in there cutting it? I mean, these guys know what, they get in that cutting room, they know what they're gonna use and what they're not gonna use, you know.
One last question way up in the back, is that okay? Sir?
I was reading that Woody Allen was not happy with the film.
Yeah, that's what I was saying, he professed to be,
What didn't he like about it?
and nothing like anything. He said the jokes all lie there, and he said the jokes aren't funny, and then he said, and then I saw him on a talk show, and he referred to me as that guy.
Oh,
He said, that guy's getting a divorce. I had to bust him about that. But, yeah, but he was mumbling about it, you know. I mean, I don't get it. I don't get it.
well, we
Some of
did
the best
get
lines.
it.
What was it Diane Keaton said? I'm alternately appalled and fascinated by the male organ.
Yeah. And then Woody's like, you know, we're in his public space. Like, and then it's just, I think,
Pretty funny line.
it's just so
Oh, my
great.
God.
I think it was funnier today than it was when I saw it when it came in.
Yeah.
I think you're right. Somebody else mentioned it too, that in their 20s they saw it and they didn't get it to the extent that they get it now. You know what I mean? It's interesting. Yeah.
You know, I had an interesting experience with that. We had they showed it at the Academy, and Woody wouldn't go, of course. His picture was way behind him, so I have to go do it.
Yeah.
And I thought, you know, and then all that stuff in his life had happened.
Oh,
and,
gosh, yeah.
and this is a young girl, yada, yada. And I thought, I don't know how this is going to go over. You know,
Right.
because, and I want to tell you, it was at the Academy. It was a sophisticated crowd, and I couldn't get off the stage. I mean, people were, you know, they're all New Yorkers, and it was such a Valentine, as I said.
Yeah.
And they just, we couldn't get them out of the theater. I mean, it was such a big kind of turnaround.
Yeah.
Although it was a hit from the beginning.
So I know some of you may have some place to go at 4 o'clock, I think, a declare thing. Okay, so I don't want to hold you up, but I just, also I hope tomorrow you get to talk about Tanner.
Oh, yeah.
88, because that is, when you think about where we are right now in this country.
Oh, boy. Where's Bob when you need him?
I know, and what an amazing just echo right now. And so anyway, I hope that's discussed too.
Yeah, I do too.
You've had such a career. I hope you'll come to Sarah Lawrence and we'll spend a good 2 or 3 hours having a conversation.
I'd like to Sarah.
Because it's just, you're such a generous and obviously valiant guy. But also, no, your stories are really meaningful. I'm learning stuff today, as I think everybody else did. It's just
I don't know who slept with whom.
Oh, that's what we want to get to, yeah, absolutely.
Got the
So
hot dog.
stick around afterwards. But anyway, thank you, audience. You can't have a week without an audience.